Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
We've got a special bonus show for you today, a migration alert. Jay Anglin from Northern Indiana. He's a freelance writer who does he's the Great Lakes region migration editor for Waterfowl 360. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome, man. Hey, we're trying to get a quick update to everyone in the Great Lakes region. What are you seeing on the ground in Indiana? I know you've been shooting some ducks the last few days. You're talking about a pretty good migration. Now we're kind of shifting gears to Michigan. Kind of just provide an overview of everything that you're seeing.
Well, because of the weather systems we've had to the north and northwest, the flow of birds, it's been very normal to me. Towards the end of October into early in November, these big corridors, like where we have here in Northwest Indiana, normally we just have a good solid, movement of birds that goes on. And that's what I'm seeing. Whereas, as everybody knows, that's hunted ducks and geese for the last, 10, 15 years. Some years it just hasn't really occurred like it does normally. So besides the calendar ducks that come through, if you're out there, like divers, seeing a lot of big ducks too. So, you can see a big fat mallard and say, oh, that's a flight bird, but, it could be from a local park. But when you start seeing black ducks, widgeon, gadwall, pintails mixed in with them, then you know that, these are new birds. And then they act new when you hunt them. And it's been really good.
Absolutely.
I think like a lot of places, Chris, we have a ton of water. So if you don't marshes are full of water and that's all fine and good. But if you're not keying in on these flooded ag fields and these weed fields, these little moist soil areas, if you're not keying in on those, you're not even seeing the birds because frankly, they're not even leaving. They can feed and loaf and roost in those areas. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the, one thing with that weather shift, I know we had talked a couple days ago, you mentioned it's going to get cold this week. Like going into this weekend, you guys are going to drop. How's that going to change the dynamic of your area and others?
It's going to be huge because right before you called, I looked at Green Bay, I looked at La Crosse, I looked at Sault Ste. Marie. These are places north and northwest, and they are literally like tonight. I think La Crosse had a low of 17 tonight. So we've got all these cold temps coming in. Next week we're talking mid to lower teens in some of those key areas, those migration hot spots. And honestly, besides your very hardy birds like, your sea ducks and your goldeneye and bufflehead, and of course there's always going to be mallards that hold out, but a ton of birds are going to start pushing. I would say probably tonight, and that's going to start moving birds. Now, down here we do have some cold temps in Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, southern Michigan, southern Wisconsin. There are some cold temps, but the daytime temps are warm enough that I suspect we'll have plenty of open water. So I think we're going to be in the hot seat here for the foreseeable future, and that's something that we just we haven't had really for a few years. This is a normal waterfowl season. Like I remember growing up, you went out in early November and there was a bunch of ducks. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Are you guys planning on getting any snowfall up there? I haven't even looked at your area.
Yeah. The biggest threat here, they were calling for, I noticed here in the next couple of days, a little bit of snow in Southwest Michigan and a little bit here. Most of that's lake effect oriented snow, which can be, you can get 2 inches or 20 inches. So I don't think anybody's predicting major snow bands, but really if you're outside of that northwest or northerly flow of wind coming off Lake Michigan, you're probably not going to see much. We've been getting a little smattering of mixed precipitation, freezing rain and snow spitting. Like last night it spit snow this morning, but nothing major.
Yeah. Are you seeing any increase at all in Canada geese? I know, just a couple of days ago, I saw you were reporting that you had a few, you were working a few groups here and there, but are you noticing a significant increase in Canada's, or are you still dealing with mainly residents in your area?
No, last week was a huge influx. Again, because we're at the bottom, where I am at the bottom of Lake Michigan here, it's sort of a funnel. So we tend to see, besides your molt migrants coming back in August, September, and of course, part of October, we usually start to see some pretty early migrants, congregate here. But last week it got ridiculous. Like overnight, my little pet flock of 200 geese that kind of bounce around out by my lease, they were there. And all of a sudden the next day there was like 1,500, and these key areas I saw tons and lots of little birds, a few specks mixed in. And then you start seeing these, these oddball snows that get mixed up and end up with a flock of Canadas. And so, yeah, we've definitely picked up a whole bunch of birds. And from what I'm hearing, some of these other key areas did too, like within a 100-mile radius of me. So we might be probably close to peak on that, picking up birds, I would guess, getting there.
Cool. So what are you hearing from you guys in Michigan, like even up around Horson's Island? I know you had mentioned you had talked to some people up there. Any good update?
Yeah, I've got good intel on that. I was actually headed up there tomorrow, and I bailed on that because I'm guiding steelhead. But hey, got to make hay when the sun shines. But I just talked to Jeremy Ullman he's been guiding on Lake St. Clair pretty much, I think, since their opener. And he said it's really good right now. Matter of fact, he called me and he said that they were done. I think he had 3 clients this morning. They were done by like 7:30 or 8 o'clock or something crazy.
Are they shooting divers?
Right after. Yeah, so they're shooting a real nice broad mix of birds right now. He's not picky when he's guiding, so they're getting a little bit of everything, from bluebills to redheads and cans, bufflehead. I asked him if he'd seen any sea ducks yet, and he said no, but they did pick up some golden eyes the last couple days. Mostly bluebills. He said, interestingly, most of them were graders. He had a couple of really funny stories. One, he said they had a bluebill in the decoys that landed in the decoys, and they were done on bluebills, and it tucked its head and went to sleep. And he said a bald eagle just circled the decoys for 15 minutes trying to get this bluebill. Now, how a bald eagle can tell the difference between decoys and a live bluebill is beyond me. But nonetheless, when they got back to the ramp, the CO said that someone had called because there was an eagle and the hunters were there. But he said that when he picked up his decoys, the bird never left. So that's probably a migrant. But nonetheless, he said it's about as good as it gets right now. So
awesome. That's great news for Michigan hunters for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. In Saginaw Bay, similar. They picked up a bunch of birds last week. The redhead migration's full swing, and they're picking up some bigger ducks too. Michigan's firing on all cylinders right now for sure.
Hey, Jay, tell us about what's going on in the UP.
Well, always have good intel on the UP, of course, because my son's up there and a couple good buddies went to school up there. What I'm hearing is the key migration areas are holding a lot of birds. My son said he saw, I sent him to one of my old haunts, and he said a flock of 500 to 600 ringnecks and redheads earlier late last week. Seeing a lot of sea ducks up there. So they're getting into scoters, and they're getting into the longtails. So, they're probably, in the UP, you start to wind up pretty quick, between Thanksgiving and now. So they're getting to that point where they're going to go Arctic pretty quick with the really cold temps at night, and they'll hold a few real hardy birds. But most of those birds are going to be down here pretty quick within the next week or so, I would say.
Yeah, I bet with this cold weather pushing in, they're going late season quick. It's kind of a flip of the switch up there for those guys in the UP for sure.
Definitely. Always. It was always staggering to me when I'd find a cool spot and I'd be all fired up. And then, like down here, you can milk it for a couple weeks, and up there you can milk it for a day or two. And then all of a sudden it's winter. So
old man winter rolls in.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. There it is, man. Michigan, Indiana, northern Indiana anyway. Looks like you guys are in the hot seat for at least the next couple days. Massive influx of birds. Get out there, enjoy it, be safe for sure. Jay, appreciate you joining me. Appreciate the information. You got any other messages for anyone out there who's looking to hunt this weekend?
I would just say, do your homework. Don't take anything for granted. I mean, there's so much water. There's so much food, and do the scouting. I mean, I think a lot of times when you have a great spot, you kind of take it for granted that sometimes it's not the greatest. And in this case, there's a lot of alternate places where these birds can go, and the farmers have been super busy picking corn. So, birds may have been bumped off your spot and they haven't come back yet. So just get out there and check other places that you might, something that you don't normally check might be holding a bunch of birds.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, and good luck this weekend.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Take care, folks.
Special thanks to Jay Anglin, the Waterfowl 360 Great Lakes Region Migration Editor, for joining me today and providing that great insight from Indiana and Michigan. And thanks to Clay Baird for producing the Ducks Unlimited podcast. He does a fantastic job with it. And thanks to you, the listeners, for supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.